Hello. I used to find it really frustrating that I seem to kind of always be in some sort of existential crisis. But then I thought about it a bit more and I was like, surely if I keep getting into existential crises and I keep interacting with media that is causing these, I must secretly love it. I think I love them because I do like to freak myself out. Also, I love philosophy and I feel like I'm my most philosophical and I'm questioning the most and I'm thinking the most when I'm really existential. And I also feel like existential media is so fantastic to like do deep dives into. Like if there's ever a piece of fiction that's going to be really fun to analyze, it's going to be a work of existentialism. And so over my years as someone who's very into philosophy and very into freaking myself out, I have compiled a list of books that kind of a surefire to spin me out for like a few weeks. However, that can be a bit much. And so also over the years, I've compiled a list of books that I find really just snap me out of existential crises and make me just realize like, I'm fine. Is the plural existential crises? Existential crises. Okay, I'm going to share both of these lists. I like to hope that they will deliver the things I've promised, because as I was kind of quickly like researching the plots of all these books to kind of like jog my memory a bit, the first half I was feeling bad after researching. I was feeling really like heavy and like cloudy and I was like, oh my god, like I actually feel quite bad. I don't know if I can record. And then the second half I was feeling light and fantastic and I was like, wait, life is so good. So I think that they will do the things that I've said that they will. Also, I'm going to keep all of these relatively spoiler free. There might be like some mild spoilers, especially with some of these shorter ones, but I'm going to try and leave as much secret as I can. Anyways, this is part one. These are books that I think will induce an existential crisis. First of all, I have Leo Tolstoy's The Death of Ivan Ilyich. This is a really short book. I checked online and it said that it would take an average reader with an average reading speed an hour and 10 minutes to read this. So this is really like, I was gonna say this is like a chillax quick read, but oh my goodness, no. I am very stingy with how highly I rate books, but this is definitely a 5-star read. But this is also definitely not a favorite book because this was really unpleasant to read. It's given away in the title. This is a book about death, but specifically you are following a man realizing that he is dying and then dying. When I heard about that, I was like, yeah, I don't really know how well that can be executed. You know, it's not like Leo Tolstoy experienced dying and then wrote this. So I was like, okay, I don't know how realistic this is going to feel and how scary this is going to feel. But this book, I'm rarely physically affected by books. I was reading this on the train and I was actually squirming in my seat because it made me feel so panicked and awful. I think what's really great about this book is that it's quite a gradual descent. Like it really feels like you are the toad in the water and the water's slowly being like put up to a boil and you don't even realize it's happening, because at first it's really chill. Like I think the first chapter isn't even about the guy, it's just about like his friends finding out he died, and then slowly, you know, it switches to the actual person who's dying and it starts off in his youth and then it slowly works its way up and up and up. Yeah, it's just really intense. This book unlocked a whole new fear of death. I'm somebody, I think like all people, who struggles with the fear of death kind of periodically. I think I go through like seasons of being really zen and fine about it, and then like really freaking out about it and being like, how can I live knowing I'm going to die? Something I'd never considered before was how lonely and scary dying actually is. Like not death, not like the absence of everything, but the actual process of like realizing that's it. Oh my goodness, I can't. Anyways, this book is what caused that. I literally never thought about that before. This book is great, I think, if you would like to induce a fear of death, but also this book touches on, I think very nicely, this kind of idea of the artificial and the authentic life, and also linked to that, what it means to live a good life. By the artificial and the authentic, I kind of mean like living for outward validation, a life that is defined as good by the metrics of success that like society sets up and by like how it should look externally, versus like actually internally being happy with your life and being happy with the choices you're making. And like, yeah, this book's really fantastic for that, and it's very short as well. Next, I have J.D. Salinger's Franny and Zoe, and this is one of my favorite books of all time. I just love Salinger, man. I love all of Salinger's work. I think I've read all of it. I think Franny and Zoe was originally published in 2 parts in the New Yorker, both Franny and Zoe respectively. It is a little bit longer, and the one complaint I have about it is that it does drag a little bit, and I think it only drags when it's like your first time reading it, because something about Salinger is that I find of his work, you often don't realize what he's kind of setting up until it hits you, and then you're like, whoa, the build-up was crazy, but I don't think you realize what he's building up to as you're reading, and that can make certain parts feel really slow and like unnecessarily slow. And I definitely did feel that. The first time I read this, I got to a part in the middle where a character is reading a letter and it just went on for so long. I was like, I actually can't. And I think I put it away and I didn't read it for ages. And then when I got back to it, I was like, wait, that letter was so necessary and like adds so much more to like the shock I got at the end of this book. So that's the one warning I will give, is that like it does drag a little bit, but it is totally worth it. I feel like Franny and Zoe is kind of like the answer to The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is also one of my favorite books ever. I think the reason why this book in particular caught me and freaked me out, first of all, I think is that the general kind of theme, not even theme, I think generally just the like quite overt references to theology, and I think specifically mysticism, really caught me, because this was around the time I was getting quite into Sufism. Sufism is a branch of Islam and it's a mystical branch of Islam. One of the key things of it, and I think what kind of drew me so much to it at the time, was this kind of idea that like we are all God. Everything in existence is God. The only purpose of life really is just to love everything as if it were God, because it is. I think there's a lot of that in Franny and Zoe, especially because there are so many just very direct references to Eastern philosophy as well as Western philosophy, which is really, really cool. And then the two other ways that I think it really got me, and I think where it really, really links to Catcher in the Rye, I think it really focuses on disillusionment, especially in like terms of coming of age, when you are like, I don't know, in college or in high school, whatever, and you're just kind of like disenchanted with everything, and you realize like, wait, life is not at all what I thought it was. And also conformity and the kind of inability to escape this sort of like constant performance that you kind of can't help but always do, and I guess like phoniness as well, which is very Catcher in the Rye. The insincerity that comes with performing for the other and for society. I think where Franny and Zoe, because The Catcher in the Rye did freak me out, but I think The Catcher in the Rye, because it's a lot more confessional, I think it was a bit easier to kind of hide behind the fact that like it's just quite a beautiful story. It's a very like tender and sweet story. Whereas Franny and Zoe, I think, is just so directly like the plot is the philosophy, like that is the driving force. The Catcher in the Rye does really touch on those themes, but it also touches on so much other stuff, and it's also a lot more like, I think what's really cool about it is it's a lot more symbolic and it's a lot more hidden in like metaphor and in like repetition of certain things, but like it's in your face of Franny and Zoe, and I think that's why it freaked me out a little bit more. So I think if you're into that kind of stuff, specifically conformity and ego and like being really disillusioned with life and feeling like you're sick of performing and you can't escape, Franny and Zoe will make that worse. And the answer at the end is really, really sweet and beautiful, but I don't think it's enough to snap you out of it just like that.
Tell me it was good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me that was good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good.
Next, I have Jean-Paul Sartre's No Exit. This is also a very short one. This is a play, and it is only one part. And there is a very, very famous line from it that you may have heard, which is, "Hell is other people." And I think that very, very beautifully sums up a lot of the play. It's three souls who are condemned to hell, and then there's a bit of a twist, and it really is like a fictional version of a lot of Sartre's philosophy in terms of us and how we relate to other people. I think from the list, this made me, in itself, it made me the least existential, but then when I kind of sat with it and thought about what that meant and what parts I perhaps related to and stuff like that, that's when I kind of started to be like, ooh. I think the thing that this play tackles is this sort of like need we have, or need that we feel we have for others to validate our experience and validate our existence, but also the fact that that can really limit our freedom. And similarly, I guess, how difficult it is to handle the responsibility of being free and how often that can be really difficult, and so we kind of turn to others to alleviate some of that responsibility. I'm editing right now and I think I explained that really fucking poorly, so I wanted to also explain a bit more. I think in particular what it is about No Exit that really gets me is the way it explores how painful and uncomfortable it can be to be viewed and judged by the other. It's uncomfortable to be perceived by other people, but how we are so desperate for it as well, and how we kind of can't help but needing it or feeling like we need it, and how perhaps it would be better to be able to assert our own experience and existence and to no longer need the other to validate our experience. But that's really, really difficult, of course. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting one for anyone kind of thinking about our relationships with other people and to what extent we need other people. Anyone who's kind of thinking about their own relationship with external validation and things like that. I think this is really, really fantastic. Next, I have Dostoevsky's The Meek One. This one is another one that I don't think in of itself gave me an existential crisis, but I think then reflecting on what I'd read, I was very freaked out and uncomfortable. The impression I get from reading it was that I think Dostoevsky meant for it to be a very uncomfortable read, and he definitely succeeded in that, because I don't think I will ever reread this. Like, it was so unpleasant. Content warning, I think that this book does delve into themes of abuse and power dynamics and age gaps pretty intensely, so do be careful if you're somebody who finds those things upsetting, because this book is quite awful about it. Again, I don't think that this necessarily was existential in of itself. I do think there was like an undercurrent of existentialist questions, but I think you can kind of find that in like every work of fiction, to be honest. I think what was the most in your face was this kind of exploration of abuse and power. And I think what is quite interesting about this book in particular is often when you read about abuse and abuses of power, you read about it, obviously it depends on the book, but I've found usually when I've read about these things, it's in quite a disconnected kind of like third person way where it's then up to the reader to interpret those actions and what might be the thought process behind those actions. But this takes place from the perspective of the abuser, and I think what's so uncomfortable about this book is that the main character clearly derives a deep sense of satisfaction, and I'd even go as far as to say pleasure, from the things he's doing and from the way that he's kind of lined things up. He's very, very comfortable being in the position that he's in. And for those reasons, I think it is very interesting, but also very, very, very hard to read. And last but not least, I have the cheekiest recommendation of my life. I have Fernando Pessoa's The Book of Disquiet. And it's cheeky because I have not read this. I didn't even read half of it. But that is because it freaked me out so bad. So I think that's why this is so good for this. I also think it might be because it is written non-linearly. It's like fragments and they're all numbered, and it will be random, like it will be like a line, and then it will be like a long musing about his work, and then it will be like a passage about death. I think it's the passage about death where I was like, oh, I need to digest that, and I just never went back to it. But I struggle a bit, I think, with non-linear storytelling. I don't know, I just kind of find it hard to like get as stuck into it because every page there's like 3 very good stopping points, and there isn't as much of like a hook, I think. And I think that also might be part of why I didn't finish it. However, this book, I'm so desperate to finish it. I did a bit of research online about this one just because I haven't finished it, but also from what I remember, this book kind of delves into everything. Like I said, it was a passage about death that kind of like made me like, oof, I need to digest that. But the thing that seems to kind of be present throughout the majority of the work is this kind of search for meaning and this kind of really deep ennui. I think the whole thing is just kind of riddled with questions about what it means to be alive, and I think it, because of that, is very applicable to, I think, anybody who tends to kind of go into a direction of existentialism and kind of questions a lot about life and muses a lot about philosophy. And probably if you're watching this video, that is you. So I think this book is just a very, very great all-round recommendation. It is quite big though. I have got my copy here. It is quite a hefty book. It's like nearly 500 pages. But because it's non-linear, you can probably just like dip your toes in here and there. Those are all some fantastic books that have freaked me out very bad in the past, in a way that is very satisfying, because I keep saying, oh, freak out, oh, like really like made me feel bad. But I mean that as someone who secretly loves an existential crisis. I don't know. I don't know whether that's necessarily healthy, but I feel like I have done a lot of growth through them. I've done loads of self-reflection. I think I am, at the end of the day, very, very happy. I think a huge reason for that can be attributed to the amount of existential crises I've had, because I've really, really been forced to confront a lot of things in those. However, that's not to say that they are always productive, and that's not to say that they are always easy. There have been times in my life where I've just been like, I wish I could just crack on and just kind of like get over this, because this is a bit silly and this is a bit like dramatic. And there have been 5 books that I found kind of always automatically just snap me out of it. And so I want to share those. This is my list of books that I think can cure most existential crises. Starting off, I have Epictetus's Of Human Freedom. Of Human Freedom is the Penguin Great Ideas compilation of some of Epictetus's work. I have Epictetus's discourses and selected writings. They are great. The more Epictetus, the better. However, I think what's so great about Of Human Freedom is that because it's so short, it's absolutely no waffle. It gets straight to the point, and that's why I think it is really, really fantastic, and I recommend if you are freaking out a little. Epictetus was a Stoic. I kind of would recommend, most Stoicism I think could probably snap you out of an existential crisis a bit, but what I particularly like about Epictetus is that he's kind of stern. Marcus Aurelius, obviously because Meditations was meant as his own personal diary, he's quite lax. It doesn't really feel like he's giving you a telling off. It does feel like Epictetus is giving you a bit of a telling off, and I think that's why I really like him. It's just no bullshit with Epictetus. Like, he really makes you feel quite silly and a bit ashamed for having like worried so much about such silly things. I think there's something quite romantic sometimes about being in an existential crisis, and that can make it a bit worse because I think it's very easy to kind of really get wrapped around in it. And I think that's why Epictetus is so great, because it really sobers you up and it's like, wait, like there was no need for all of this theatrics. I'm fine. Next, I have Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. I think The Prophet is very, very fantastic because where Epictetus is kind of a bit more of a general, like he does give some rules and kind of like guidelines for how you could live your life, but more than anything he's just like, stop worrying, nothing is in your control and that's just the way it is. The Prophet gives more of a kind of guideline as to how to live your life in a way that I think is very soothing to read and also fantastic to implement. The Prophet covers quite a lot of advice on like so many areas of life. It talks about love, it talks about having children, it talks about like ethics of buying and selling things, it talks about how you should work, it talks about education, like it really talks about so many things. So I feel like any qualm you have, the Prophet will probably have an answer. And it's also written very beautifully, it's very lyrical, and I think because of that, when you're reading it, it isn't just so like, this is what you should do. It's beautiful, it's just so beautiful to read and it's so soothing. And I find that it brings me so much peace and kind of answers so many questions in a way where I'm like, oh, that should have been obvious. But also like when you actually implement some of the things that Khalil Gibran writes about, I really think that like if you were to follow the Prophet to a T, that would be the secret to happiness. Next, I have Albert Camus' A Happy Death. A Happy Death, I think, is like the happier version of The Outsider. I think it actually was like the original version of The Outsider, and then he decided to kind of stop writing it in order to focus more on The Outsider. I hate The Outsider. This is my controversial philosophy and literature opinion that is going to get me barred from all like literature spaces online because I feel like everyone loves The Outsider so much. I did not like it, and I was expecting a similar thing when I opened The Happy Death and the first thing I see is Masol, and I was like, wait, I swear that's the name of the guy from The Outsider. And just like the first part, I was like, I'm literally reading The Outsider, and I was not expecting very good things. However, I found this to be really, really soothing. Where it opens with similar themes to The Outsider, that kind of like disconnect with life, I really like the answer in A Happy Death. Some people have complained, I've heard that it's a bit disjointed and it isn't very clear, but I think I really, really like that because it clearly is Camus' kind of own realization, and your own realization is going to be different, but I think there's a lot in there that could inspire your own. And personally, I found after I read it, I just felt good. I just felt really good after I read it, and I'm actually currently rereading it. So yeah, I really recommend that. Next, I have Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, and this one is a bit more personal because actually what I would recommend is just any very feel-good children's book that you personally find nostalgic. I think Little Women just does it for me, first of all because it was one of the first classics that I really enjoyed when I was a kid, so it's got that huge nostalgic element, but I also think the fact that it's like, it's very pleasant. Like I know that there are some sad things that happen, but as a whole it's a very, very sweet story, it's very wholesome, and they just kind of get on with life. And I think whenever I read it, I'm like, shit, I should just probably get on with life, and it's not that deep. But I think any children's book that is just generally quite pleasant, I think particularly children's classics, because they're written in a way that I think is very slow paced, and I think anything that you might find nostalgic, I'd recommend. And last but not least, I have, I'm going to butcher this name so awfully, Anton de Saint-Exupéry, The Little Prince. Le Petit Prince. This is like one of my favorite books ever, and the reason I'm including this is first of all because I do think this is a fantastic antidote to existential crisis, but also because I originally read this because I was in an existential crisis and I was doing some research about it. I had been researching the idea of the puer aeternus by Carl Jung. I don't actually know how that's pronounced. Anyways, I am not particularly keen on Jungian psychology. I don't think I necessarily agree with it. But the puer aeternus, or the puella aeterna, was like the perfect explanation for what the fuck I was going through at the time. It's the idea of the divine child or the child god. It's a person who is basically like socially and emotionally stunted and immature, and I made some notes on it. It's just so Holden Caulfield. I think I read this because I was researching about Holden Caulfield, and because I was like, what is wrong with me? And I was trying to figure out what was Holden Caulfield's deal, and then someone was like, oh, he's a puer aeternus, and then I researched that and I was like, wait, this is actually what's wrong with me. But anyways, the puer aeternus leads a provisional life for fear that they may be caught in situations that it might not be possible to escape from. They really, really strive for independence and freedom, and they really resent boundaries and limits and anything that might be restricting. Spot on. And then I was reading about it and I saw some people talking about The Little Prince, and I'd heard loads about The Little Prince, but I'd never actually read it. And then I was in Waterstones with my boyfriend, and something cheeky that I'm not sure if you're allowed to do, but I do in Waterstones, is if there's a book that I want to read but I'm not sure about, I'll take it and I'll just sit in the Waterstones cafe. I assume you can do this, and I just read the book, and then if I don't like it, I just put it back on the shelf, and I make sure that I take very good care of it while I do that. And I took The Little Prince. I just read it in one go, then and there, and I literally was crying the whole time reading it in the middle of Waterstones cafe because it was just so beautiful. And I think what's great is that because it is a children's book, there is that kind of like conflict resolution arc. The conflict being existential crisis stuff, and the resolution being, okay, everything's okay, life is okay. There is so much symbolism within The Little Prince, and I think because that symbolism, so much of it is this kind of innocence and naivety of a child. I think if you are somebody who is a bit like me, and like often a lot of the things that make you feel existential and freak you out is this kind of like, fuck, I'm not a kid anymore. And also anyone who I think really, I don't know how to really phrase it, but like, for example, like I work with children and I absolutely love it, and I feel like observing the kids, I learn so much from them, and I'm so like inspired by children. Like I feel like children are so clever, and I really envy that kind of freedom of expression that children have, how pure children's expressions are. And I think anyone who's kind of like, who loves children very intensely, I think The Little Prince is really, really fantastic because the metaphor is through the eyes of a child. So yeah, I think that The Little Prince is really, really fantastic. I love it so much. It's like one of my favorite books. I literally have like 2 copies. But yeah, anyways, I hope that those will get you out of an existential crisis if you are in one. I hope that my first set of books will get you in one if you'd like to be in one. I would love to do more book list kind of things because I really love reading, and I think a lot of people follow me for book content, and I've not really delivered book content, so here you go. If you're interested in supporting the Soggy Race 3 channel, you can join my like membership thing on YouTube, and there are quite a few perks. For example, I will be going live once a month, and I'll discuss with the members and stuff to find a time that works well, because I think that that would be a really nice way to have a more intimate kind of conversation with people. You also get access to my videos 12 hours early and ad-free, and there are also a few other perks, so you can have a look at that. And you can also buy me a coffee at my coffee link, which is in my link tree, and also my account is SoggyRice3. Feel free to subscribe and like and comment because I love reading your guys' comments. Please let me know if you have any books that either get you in existential crises or get you out of them, because I am always on the hunt for more existentialist kind of stuff. I struggle reading anything else, to be honest, so if you have any recommendations, please do let me know, because yeah, I'm always on the hunt. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed.